All right, I know it's been a long time since my last video, about 6 months, but a lot has happened since then, and this video will hopefully explain a little bit of what I've been up to with both the van that I built for a client and the van that I'm building right now for myself. So in my last series of videos that I made, it was about 4 to 5 videos kind of covering the last van that I was living in. It was my 2014 Dodge ProMaster that I built out. It was a cool project. It was my first van that I built. A lot went into it, obviously. I didn't have any prior knowledge of how to build anything beyond just a bench before I started that project. So learning electrical, learning plumbing, learning just other basic cabinetry on top of all that was quite the endeavor. And after going through that whole process with that first van and coming out the other side with both the skills and the tools and just overall knowledge of how to build something like that, I I don't know, I felt bored. You know, it's that process of when you finish something, what do? You just either live in it and you keep living in it, or you just move on to the next thing. And so after a friend kind of sparked the idea of upgrading to a Mercedes Sprinter, which I'd always wanted to do, I just never thought that'd even be a possibility. I thought it was so far off that it was never something that I could try and pursue. I just checked into it. I looked into it and kind of ended up just deciding to sell my last van. It was a great couple from California that purchased it, and I think they're still traveling. I kind of keep in touch with them every now and then, but with that money, I was able to upgrade to a Mercedes Sprinter. It's a 2017, and it's such a, I don't want to say improvement because every van is different and has their own pros and cons, but for me, it was everything that I'm looking for. And that whole project has been ongoing since about October when I purchased it. And I'm going to make a series of videos covering that project too. But for today's video, I want to cover the client's van. Now, this client was a traveling musician who had approached me for my last van when I was selling that. Unfortunately, the couple that purchased it had already put a down payment, so I couldn't technically list that for sale any longer. So what ended up happening was she purchased the van, I built it out. Now today's video is going to cover this whole build out. It's not covering the kind of behind the scenes. I did capture some B-roll clips along the way of time lapses and just other steps that I had throughout that whole process. But for the ProMaster, I did finish the build about a month and a half ago. And dropped it off, and she's off back in Minnesota, I think, right now with it. And I got to do a tour video before I dropped it off with her. I was fortunate enough to contact my friend Kyle, who came over and helped film this tour before I left Seattle and before I dropped the van off with her when it was about finished. Some of the parts in the van that you'll see today aren't finished, and some of the parts are being wrapped up while we filmed this video because it was about 2 to 3 days before I dropped it off. So a lot of the final touches like trim or paint or things like that weren't already in it. But with this tour video, I wanted to show a lot of the specs and design and styling that went into this build, because even though I didn't really capture a lot of the behind the scenes and the how-tos along the way, I wanted to at least capture the final product and show everything that went into it. So with that, enjoy the tour. That was a snappy one. How's it going, everyone? Just wanted to give one quick tour before I drop this off at the client's house. This is the van I've been working on for the past 2 months. As you can see today, it's a different day, different time, different clothing, a little bit more scrappy, than I am in the preceding footage that you saw, but just wanted to give a quick tour, tell you some of the specs that I put into this van, some of the electronics, some of the plumbing, some of the accessories. So, of course, typical Seattle weather, it's raining right now, but we'll try to get all this done very quickly on the outside. What you can see here is a custom-made countertop made by some friend of the client's here in Seattle. It's nice walnut butcher block, heavily stained, as you can see. Blends really well with the whole design. What we wanted to do was have an area for her to kind of have the countertop come out at an angle, but not necessarily feel claustrophobic to where it's just a full square shape. So the idea was to build it at an angle here to include also a cabinet underneath for some extra storage, but again, keep that nice and open feeling. What you can see kind of around the corner here before we jump inside is the shower slash kind of wet bath area. You have the toilet underneath. It's a composting toilet, Nature's Head, same as my last van that I had. It's a great toilet, great for composting. Such an easy way to clean it, such an easy way to, it's maintenance free basically too. There's some electronics involved, but not a heavy amount to where it's impossible to install it. The shower, of course, such a perk to have, nice hot shower whenever you want it. Some people include the more kind of configurable one where they have the kind of curtain drop down at a certain area that's hidden or anything like that. I always personally like to include kind of a more hard off, just shaped room for it to be used as either like a changing area or a shower or a wet bath. Just included some level of privacy. Some people don't like it because that design kind of takes up more space and that's a permanent way, but for me, having something configurable can kind of get messy sometimes where you have to let the curtain dry before you put it away. Just certain things about having a nice solid room as a changing area wet bath that feels more like a homey vibe to it, and I just like to include it in my builds. All right, so now we're inside the van. Nice and open design, you can tell. I like to keep that in my builds. I don't like the claustrophobic kind of too many accessories, too many walls on either side of you. I want it to be open and feel homey enough, but also at the same time be very functional. And this, as you'll see, is a very custom build to where the client is a traveling musician, so she has a keyboard where she needs to teach lessons daily, you know, via remotely, but she wanted that included in the kitchen area. So in this kitchen area, you can see this table, and it slides all the way out to where you'd be sitting and you pull it down, but the top of it actually pulls off in a way. You can see some tools here. We're not exactly done with the build yet, but her keyboard is gonna sit right here. It fits perfectly, and it's also hidden. So the thing that she noted that, you know, in the future, if she wanted to ever sell this van, she wanted it to be kind of configurable in that way to where someone wouldn't have it as this one use only kitchen table area. So again, if they ever want to hide it, they just simply put the top back on it and you can hide, you know, that area, even use it for storage if you'd like. And then when it's all kind of put back in place, slide it back in and that's it. It's all good. And there's also a lock on it too on the side here with a little hook so you can keep it from sliding out anytime it returns. So we'll move back to the front here. You can see in this kitchen area, you have a nice bronze sink here, even nice bronze faucet here. Both, again, just super nice design. She chose a lot of the aesthetics, so all the stain she did a couple weeks ago too. We just would trade off basically, where I would finish everything build wise, drop it off with her. She would continue on some of the stain, and then just basically just doing it like that. We're a very collaborative effort, I'd say, and that's what I like to do with these builds, is not only just, you know, have the design layout, but make sure I have feedback from the client to know what their needs are, what their style is, and if they want to have a hand in any of the build or learn some of the process themselves, be open to sharing that with them and have a, you know, some kind of education process along the way too. So moving back, this is the closet area. None of the hardware has been chosen yet, so there still has to be handles put on everything, but right now we just have some camping gear in here. Kind of opens up. It's a nice way to not only have extra storage that's functional for kind of a rack if you want to put it in here, but also this middle section here between the closet and the bathroom actually conceals a lot of the PEX piping that we used for the plumbing. So it's just a nice way to kind of bridge that gap where you're hiding the plumbing, and it's also acts as a functional space for extra storage if you want it. Underneath this area, right down here, you have your hot water tank. It's a little bit messy right now, of course, but hot water tank. It's a 4-gallon tankless water heater, Bosch. It's great for about 10 minutes of hot water for a shower at a time, and of course it's kind of never ending to where if you leave it on while you're taking the shower, it'll heat up the water as it passes through that device. So just including that to where I don't really like to use propane in my vans too. I know it's kind of up for debate because a lot of people like to have kind of propane because it takes away from, you know, your battery life usage and things like that, but just heard one too many horror stories about the tank either exploding or just being leaks in the piping and stuff like that, to where if you put enough power and enough batteries in a van, you can avoid having propane or any kind of gas usage for heating, you know, heaters, any kind of device like that. So again, it's just a personal preference, but with this build, thankfully, we're able to use just battery power to heat up all the water and pretty much anything else she needs in here. So now we're back to the back of the van here. This is the bench/bed area. So again, with all my van builds, I like to have it kind of as a dual focused kind of functional piece to where it's not only a bench, it also acts as a bed. And that was my last build out that I used. That's my current Sprinter build out. And that works for this one too, even though it's a much different kitchen design in the back than what my usual builds are. So again, here's all my water under this side. It's a 30-gallon freshwater tank. It runs through a filter, through an accumulator also to keep the pressure nice and always on tap if you need it. And then it's just simple PEX, hot and cold, all the way through the rest of the van. 30 gallons is great. I mean, for about a week, if not more, if you're even conservative with the water usage, it'll last you that whole time. And filling up takes about 5 minutes if you're hooked up next to just a normal garden hose spout. So 30 gallons for me has always worked perfectly. It's also perfect dimensions, I'd say, for the benches that I build. Anything more or less, there'd just be either empty space or it'd be too big to where you'd have to build the bench larger. So moving on from the bench, we have some extra storage in here, another L-shaped bench right here for an extra storage. And on this side, this whole kitchen cabinet area was kind of the biggest part of this build. Kind of tested my, I'd say, skills as a, not designer, because I'm not really one, but just trying to make all the dimensions of everything fit perfectly to be functional for not only standing at the countertop, when you're up here, but also level when you're sitting at the kitchen, and also level for the bed, which is these platforms right here. So what these do is these slide all the way out and they rest on this lip right here. There's another one right here. So these two platforms bridge this gap, and then you have a mattress just laid across the top. The bench cushions double as the mattress too. So it's a nice normal sized, I'd say full, if not larger size bed by the time you make it. And again, takes 10 seconds to put together. So when you're done, you just push these back into the wall, or back into the counter, I guess, and they're hidden. You would never know they're there. Underneath all of this is the electrical, which kind of a weird gap to get to, so I'll probably show a different shot of that. But what you have are 3 100 amp hour Renogy lithium batteries. Went with lithium this time just because it's so much more efficient. You actually get the full 100% usage out of the batteries versus having to worry about the 50% draw that lead acid and the deep cycled gel batteries have. So that's, again, 300 actual amp hours of lithium usage. You have a 2000 watt inverter, which is perfect for the hot water heater, the induction stovetop. Both of those devices max out at 1800 watts. So unless you're running both of those devices and something else at the same time, you never have to worry about blowing the breakers or the inverter at the same time. There's 2 outlets, one on each side. There's one outlet in the kind of closet area. There's another outlet right above the kitchen area for cooking, plugging in the keyboard when you want to use it. You have the inverter remote control right here. You can turn on the inverter whenever you want. You can also turn it off. And it's kind of a known well thing amongst builders and people who've been in vans for a while, but inverters, when they're on, draw about 1 amp or less of power. So you don't always want to have your inverter on because it can be some sort of draw. So having the ability to turn it off whenever you want very easily like that, without having it stowed away or having to dig in to try and find it, it's kind of a nice feature to have. You have your Victron also right here. This is your battery monitor. There's also a battery monitor built into the charge controller, which is hooked up to the panels up top, but the Victron is a little bit more accurate because it's hooked right into the shunt right next to the battery versus going through a different kind of system that the charge controller has. So having a really accurate readout right there, right above your kitchen whenever you want it, is a really nice feature to have too. One more cool thing about the interior of the van, and I guess exterior too, is having the skylight, which is always something I like to include in my builds too. I prefer having as much natural light in as possible. Some people like having a little bit more stealth to their van builds. I would consider this to be a pretty stealth in general, compared to other builds, to where there's 2 bunk windows right here and then the skylight up top, which lets, you can't really tell on a day like today, but usually lets in a ton of light. This is the Arctic Tern skylight. A lot of Dometic ones were either sold out or not in stock. And it turned out that the Arctic Tern, through, I think it was Campervan HQ, I'll throw a link up, I'm sure, but it's just, they're based out of Colorado, and they had this one in stock. I had seen it before on different builds. You got your same kind of shades, you have your same blackout. The only cool thing about this is that it's actually electric, so you can open it electronically. And I know there's going to be rain coming in, so I'll probably close it, but close that back up. Another cool feature about this is that it has LED lights built into it. So not only do you have, I'd say, 3 LED lights outside, but you also have another whole panel back here for extra lighting if you ever want it. But yeah, not dimmable, but these are. So either way, letting in lots of natural light from the roof is always a cool perk to have because it limits the amount of kind of visibility from the side of the van, so you get less people looking in and more just light coming from the top where no one can tell the difference. So just a nice feature to have for that, and both ventilation. So some of the features which we didn't go over, which you can't really tell from in here, is the panels up top for solar charging. You have 2 100 watt Renogy polycrystalline panels, so great, for efficiency, except usually on the shade they're not as good as monocrystalline, but there is sun, it's usually a little bit stronger. That's also another topic you can do research too between comparing the two, and there's also a little bit of a price difference too, but polycrystalline is much more, just I'd say popular, you know, it's much more available, so that's what we went with. Just drilled straight into the metal, sealed it up for no leaks. There's the Max Air fan right behind you there too. It's great for just using it for ventilation. The last accessory in here, which is always nice to have, is the fridge, which is down here, and we'll show a shot of that. But it's not the CFX kind of ice chest cooler looking design where you pull it out and open it from the top. It's actually the mini fridge design, and I went with that, kind of learning from my last van that I had, because it just took up a lot of space to also hide it and then roll it out whenever you want to use it. And this actually has its dedicated freezer department, so you don't have to put your items that you want colder at the bottom and hope that they stay frozen with the freezer fridge combo. You actually have a dedicated area to put ice cream or any kind of other thing that you'd want frozen, and you can know that it's always going to stay frozen. So having that design under there, and it's just always tucked away, it's just a door that opens, you don't have to like push it in, pull it out of anywhere. Just nice to have, and that's what I went with for both this and also my personal van that I'm building. So if you're a client, or if you're looking to build your own van out, and if you just want a consultation for that, feel free to reach out. I'm answering pretty much any questions regarding all those topics, and I want to educate people on not only helping them build their vans out themselves or building it for them, but teaching them about the lifestyle of this as well, to where everything from safety to where to get water to where to get resources to just knowing how to navigate van life in general. Feel free to reach out with any questions you have, or let's just start a conversation, and thanks for watching. Thanks for watching that video, guys. I appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this, if you want to learn more how-tos and behind the scenes of how to build the van process and what I do with my own builds, feel free to subscribe for more of those and turn on notifications. You know all this whole routine, I have to say it, but I just appreciate you guys watching and taking the time to see everything that I'm putting into these builds and everything that I want to do with this van conversion process, and stay tuned for more.